Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Joined with Owen, Jake. We're here to do the Texas-Florida game preview. But before we jump into that game, Owen, what is going on in your football world right now?
Well, I have currently I'm coaching, doing the normal grind. We're actually got like 3 or 4 games left in the season. So we're still moving through that. We're actually getting a ton. For some reason, a bunch of kids transferred in really late, so we're getting some reinforcements now. So it's looking up from there. But outside of that, I do have a hot take for this podcast here, based around it's tangentially related to football. It's actually a movie hot take. I recently went and saw the football horror movie Him on Saturday. And in my hot take it is a top 3 football movie of all time. Absolutely loved it. Phenomenal movie. That's not a popular opinion, apparently. I've looked up reviews and people don't like it. I loved it.
I don't even know what movie it is. Like, that is the bubble I'm living in. What's the name of the movie again?
It's called Him, because the phrase "I'm him," they're using that. It's Jordan Peele's production company made it, and it has Marlon Wayans in it. He's like the villain in the movie, and it's about a quarterback who got injured, had a brain injury, and so he missed out on the combine. And he's trying to make it into the pro league, so he's training under basically the Tom Brady stand-in, the GOAT of the league, training with him for like a week, and it gets into like weird culty territory, but it's really just this giant analogy for like how a professional football player's life operates in the league and like all the different things they have to go through. It's like metaphors and analogies stacked on each other for people who aren't insane about football and crazy to the point that we are on this podcast. I can definitely see where they go into it expecting to be like some cookie cutter cult horror movie. They're like, I'm not a big fan. But like if you like know as much detail about it as like we do, it's definitely something that like you can see through the metaphors and be like, this is actually pretty cool.
Okay, so you may have convinced me to take the girlfriend out and go see it. Maybe we'll see. Jake, how are things in the Green Bay Packer world and the draft world for you?
It's nice that the Packers have the week off. I think there's a lot of therapy sessions going around after Sunday. I'm not super moved. It's pretty early. But I do think that the content sphere has gotten its money's worth after the first 2 weeks, followed by the next 2 out of the Packers, when you look at the national markets anyway. When it comes to the draft, I mean, I was at a wedding on Saturday, but I was still kind of peeking in at Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State, Oregon to just check some guys out. But again, not surprised at the results. I think it kind of stuck with what we've seen historically. Alabama's owned Georgia for quite some time, and Penn State struggles in those games where a team has a single-digit number in front of their name. So pretty standard stuff, I think, on Saturday.
You're missing out on the most stacked game of all, Washington, Ohio State. Absolute barn burner.
Yeah, I was in the car on that one, so I was kind of like having to almost listen to one of 4 during that time. That it was tough. There was a lot of travel on Saturday, but I was at the wedding during the 6:30 stuff and was able to kind of peek over and listen.
Yeah, I got out of my game that morning and I threw on that game because this came on at 3:30 and we were done at like 1, and I was like, if Washington could have just scored in the red zone, it would have been a lot more entertaining against number 1 Ohio State, but they just couldn't put it together. But I mean, my guys, my dudes, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, still showing out. And Jamal Williams is definitely he's definitely going to be a dude, I think.
Does he stay there?
And that's the question, right?
Yeah, we might be here a little while and not get into our game if we discuss that. But
Hank is a Washington fan, and he was saying that the Washington coach and the quarterback are going to Florida.
I can believe it. There's definitely been some. I know I've heard the rumors about Fish going to Florida, but I didn't know if he goes. I'm sure any of the top talent that did stay or that he brought in from Arizona State are going to be flipping over with him.
Yeah, does Tacario Davis still have eligibility? He's followed him so far.
I think he's out of it now.
You think he's out of it? Okay. because he would.
Yeah,
take the ball
I
away.
think Davis is going to be one of the more sought after corners. Just based upon when we did the Washington Ohio State preview, the grades that were coming in on Davis from both of the podcasters were, and we had pretty good. I know when Bill and Randall covered Davis last year, they had solid day 2 grades on him last year.
Okay.
And then this year he's playing just as well, if not better. So, but we're here for Texas, Florida. And is this game going to be lopsided, do we think?
I think it comes down to which quarterback for both teams shows up. Like you obviously have the highs when it comes to both guys, but also we've seen this year like lows from both as well. And DJ Lagway specifically, you can expect it being a true sophomore quarterback, a redshirt freshman. I can't remember which one he is. But then between that and Arch Manning also having limited starting reps coming into this season, we've seen the ups and downs of both of them. I think in this game, if you're going to see it get lopsided, one of them is going to be on track to having an up game where the other one is just struggling, like we've seen in the past, and that I think will dictate it more than anything else. Is what quarterback shows up for which team. Could be a shootout. Both of them could show up and show out with all their talent, and it could be one of the best games of the year. Or it could be a lopsided affair where a team like Texas, with as much defensive talent they have, puts Lagway in a bind, and Manning's able to figure it out as being the bit more of the veteran quarterback of the two.
Jake, how about you? Do you think that this game is even, or there's like every single, like I scheduled like a lot of Florida podcasts expecting them to be good this year.
Yeah.
And yeah, that like some of their best players, like Caleb Banks, is my understanding is he's not playing in this game.
Yeah.
And he was probably the highest ranked Florida player. He was probably the highest ranked player in either team coming into the game.
Yeah. But then he gets hurt. Yeah, I think when it comes to this one, I think Owen outlined it really well. Like if Texas, stays with their matching stuff on the back end, if they can kind of confuse Lagway a little bit, who I think, again, both of these guys at QB continue to have to speed up their process, right? They don't have that many starts, like especially Arch. Arch does not have that many starts right under his belt, like Lagway really either. And so it's probably going to end up being two defensive coordinators going, all right, what can we do to continue to speed up their process to make mistakes? And I think Texas probably, especially without Banks in the game, has, I think, more at its disposal to be able to do that from a personnel perspective. So if it does get out of hand, it's because kind of one of these defenses takes over. And again, with the high volatility that these quarterbacks have kind of played with so far this season, that there is that potential. But at the same time, we could just see, as long as both quarterbacks, if they're playing poorly but are taking care of the ball at the very least, we could probably see. I don't think a close game is out of the question in this one. It could be a battle for Texas going down there.
So, Jake, who is your highest graded player that's playing in the game, right? So we can take Caleb Banks out of the discussion, but for a 2026 draft board, who's your highest graded player?
This one was tricky, honestly. I think there's a few guys without Banks in this game. I think there are a few guys who could probably toss their hat in the ring a little bit. I'm gonna go, even though he's smaller. I'm gonna go this route. I think you could make a case for three, but I'm gonna go with Malik Muhammad. I think you could make a case for me for both Sapp and Slaughter as well. But I'm going to talk just a little bit about Muhammad, who I think, we haven't seen a lot of him against top competition. Obviously, Texas really hasn't played anyone other than Ohio State. So if you're kind of looking at like, okay, what's Muhammad done? You're probably looking back towards the playoff games. How did Clemson go? How did Arizona State go? Right? How did Ohio State go? And then Ohio State from this year. If that's kind of, you're trying to cram and catch up on what he's been doing. What I think he's done really well at, and you watch the Ohio State game from, in September, you see a player who is extremely twitchy, incredible at kind of matching break points. Like, I think everybody talks about that one like Carnell Tate rep where he does a great job giving that extra vertical pressure and kind of gearing down. Really, the only reason he wins that and catches the football is because he just kept going back to the football. Like, if you watch the break point on that rep, you see that Muhammad's got eyes on the core and knows like when that break is happening. So he has a great feel for understanding when breaks are going to happen and has the twitch, the footwork, all of that to match it. And I think when you look at him in that scheme as well, they do a great job pattern matching. He's making good call outs. He's communicating, and he plays feisty on top of it. Now, again, is he going to be able to hang on the perimeter at that frame? That would be really tricky, right? You're looking, because again, he's not even at where Wiggins is at this point in Baltimore, right? In terms of the frame, in terms of kind of the weight he's carrying. But at the same time, when he can initiate some of that physicality, he's doing a lot with catch technique at the top of routes. He's kind of frustrating guys a little bit. And he's willing to stick his nose to help defend the run, which I think is very key for kind of these guys at nickel. If you want to move him there, that kind of play with their hair on fire, right? You look at how Jacob Parrish has been doing with Tampa Bay to this point, and he has that kind of mold of like, I'm playing with my hair on fire at all times, right? But I'm also a good cover player. And so if you want to move Muhammad into the nickel at the next level, that's totally fine. And I feel like, when it comes to playing the ball, playing the receiver, right, handling the catch point, I think he's shown some real promise there as well. And when you combine that with, instincts from off coverage, quick in transition, and playing more physical when he can, I think that, is a reason why I'm bringing him up so early. Now, when, he started taking it to Jeremiah Smith a little bit, and then Smith said, okay, well, I'll just initiate some physicality. And that's kind of what happens when a 6'2", 6'3", 220 receiver, gets hands on you. You kind of lose some of those matchups. So that's where maybe that transition to nickel makes more sense. But I am very impressed with what I've seen in a lot of big games from Muhammad.
Oh, and where are you on Muhammad right now?
So I think we covered Texas in the preseason rankings when we were talking about the different kind of team breakdowns, and at the time I was relatively high on Muhammad. I think for what the consensus was, he was kind of all over the map when it came to what the consensus was on who liked who, and like some people had him like round 3-ish. I think I do still have him in like that day 2 category, and I think Jake hit the nail on the head with a lot of the stuff. Was you could see some of the athletic dynasticism. And as well as he has that mentality, kind of like what we talked about with like a Jordan Tyson or some of these like Casey Concepcion, some of these smaller receivers having that mentality of like playing bigger than their size. You can see that with corners as well, and you like that idea, that feistiness when it comes to players, especially if you're going to project them inside to the slot. I feel like Muhammad as a player on the outside, it is so. Like, you're a little worried about the level of physicality, and it showed up. Like you love the game against Ohio State because it shows you what he looked like against like an NFL number 1 X receiver. If you're drafting him to be your CB1 or CB2 to play on the boundary, there are going to be teams that move their number 1 receiver around to try to create those mismatches and get you against those guys. And can you hold up against them is the real big question. And if you don't want to do that, you want to minimize that, you put them in the slot. And then Jake also raised up a good point. He's like, okay, when you put him in the slot, then that becomes now an element and dimension of their game needs to become a strong run defender. You see that from the best of the nickel corners in the modern NFL, Kenny Moore, Teron Johnson, Jacob Parrish, as Jake mentioned, with Tampa. Like, all these guys who are able to come in and play physical downhill and fill the run, because they have to be a lot of times with these teams playing in base nickel, the additional run defender, that third linebacker, their third kind of inside the box defender when they're not passing it. And I don't know if Muhammad's physical restrictions, even though it would kick him inside, also prevent him from being a very strong slot corner. So I do think if he's going to make the transition to NFL, I do think boundary, because like the physical limitations on him, at least what he's shown so far with its size, on the boundary, yes, it's going to show up with the route running and physicality, like against Jeremiah Smith. But if you have maybe a more zone-heavy system that allows him to not have to mix or mirror and match and run with guys and be sticky and rebound when they use that physicality to create separation, he may be able to fit better as a boundary corner than in the slot, because even in a zone-heavy scheme, and if you're in the slot, you need to be able to fill and fit the run with a strong, with just strength in general, because you're going to be taking on tight ends and fullbacks and pulling linemen in that space there. So I think for me, I like him best as a boundary corner, but it's going to be more so limited to what scheme he can be as a boundary corner. I just don't see him much as an interior guy just because I have those questions more so when projecting him inside than I do when he is on the boundary.
Okay. And Owen, is Muhammad your highest graded player in this game, or do you have somebody graded higher?
I have Anthony Hill Jr. graded higher. I'm not sure. He's playing, right? That could be correct. I know the question was who's the highest graded player playing. Yeah, for me, even coming through the preseason and holding still to this point in the process, Anthony Hill Jr. is just like he's a player at the linebacker position, which has become kind of devalued in the draft circles. Especially like outside of like the year when Jack Campbell was a first round pick, you don't really see a ton of guys who are stacked linebackers going in that first round. Especially like looking at last year with I think the first backer was Schlesinger off the board in the top of the second, who is being phenomenal right now for the Browns.
Jihad Campbell went at the end of round one.
You're right.
Before all the YouTube comments pour in.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
We're 3 or 4 picks apart, but we're good.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if someone had jumped in the back there. It's been a few months, but and we're into this cycle now. That draft might as well be 10 years ago. But Anthony Hill is one of those players where it's like you see, especially that Ohio State game where it was kind of their best level of competition to play. He had some plays where you're like questioning where his processing is at and what the ability to play at the mentally quick can he process it and play at that NFL speed. And then some other times you're like, okay, he's there. He's flowing to the ball correctly. He's able to physically handle these Ohio State offensive linemen, stack and shed and make plays and fly through and shoot gaps and be like that stereotypical like new aged Mike linebacker that has the size, that has the athleticism, has the length to be kind of a new age defender in the middle of the box. So I do think for me, he does have enough flashes on tape that show me that he does have the processing flashes while having no real question marks when it comes to like his athleticism and his build and his ability to weaponize that inside the box. So for me, even though it's a less valued position, I think Anthony Hill Jr. is my highest graded player overall in this game.
And Jake, where are you and Anthony Hill Jr., the linebacker from Texas?
For me, when we were going through these players, it was kind of the 3 I mentioned at the top, and then Hill was probably next, just a step below those 3, just because I think Owen Highland did perfectly. Like, I think in this day and age, finding guys who, are willing and able at times to take on those blocks and flow downhill while also having enough size and the pursuit speed to handle playing in enough space when teams are trying to, yes, a little bit as we shift, not much worry about stressing the amount of space, but they're still kind of doing it in different ways, right? You still have, teams that are going to stress you horizontally and vertically in coverage, right? And so you want to be able to have linebackers who, can run the pole in Tampa or, be flowing to the ball, but also be able to retreat and get back into windows with enough athleticism, right? So there has to be that level when you're playing that position, right? That's why you got teams that, again, are going after the guys like Campbell and Schlesinger, even though it's a little more devalued. And you got guys going after, Green Bay went after Quay Walker super early because he was supremely athletic, right? And had plenty of size to the position. Jack Campbell going in the first round. Like, there's some level where you either play to because Campbell had it and the athleticism and the size. So you have to kind of play to both of those if you can, but find one or the other at the very least. And with Hill, I think flowing to the football, he does a really nice job. You watch him against some counter runs where he's kind of he's further away from the ball a little bit, or he is to the weak side of the run where he is doing a nice job, again, kind of working away at least from contact and flowing to the football really nicely. You see a guy who understands where plays are going, I think. And, I think with him, there is still, to me, a level of, okay, what's a little bit of the plan sometimes. I think it's very hit or miss when he gets to that contact portion of playing where it's a lineman, is he going to try to dip under contact? Is he going to, what's the plan? Because I think Schlesinger had that question as well, and he's kind of figured it out. I think he was even, it was pretty drastic what his issues were when contact arrived, coming in last process. But it seems like Hill has done a better job of that. He's extremely willing, right? He's not a guy who's missing tackles out there at all. He brings that kind of thumper mentality, even though I know he's, I think, listed around 235-ish, which, I think is big enough, right? We're not talking about a guy who's in the low 220s or anything like that. I think to me, I think there are times where it just feels like you can see his mind going a million miles a second in coverage a little bit, where it's like sometimes it isn't like, this is your assignment or something like that, where it's like you kind of have to feel out the concept, understand where your eyes need to go. So I do see a little bit of that. There's a tendency to sometimes overrun plays a little bit for my liking. And again, that getting to, finding a specific way or ways to defeat contact is, I think, what's going to see him elevate for me. But again, there's so many tools that are there, because I think, especially in the run game, I think he knows what he's seeing, which I think is really important, because there are guys who are all over the place, in terms of what they think they're seeing, in terms of the run game. So he definitely gets points there. And I think he is still growing into, the physical tools when it comes to his development. And I think, as Texas now, they start to get to the schedule where it's like, okay, we played Ohio State. Now we got the cupcakes out of the way. Now we're going to get back to real competition. I think you're going to really see Hill's medal, which I'm really excited to see what happens.
So, question in the chat: Texas safety Michael Taff. I hope I pronounced the last name effectively. Oh, and any thoughts on the Texas safety?
Well, I'm glad you brought him up, because the next question would be, who's your next highest graded player? It would have been Michael Taff. Absolutely living up to the billing that I thought he would coming into the season. For a fan of a team that is probably going to be looking to draft a safety in the upcoming draft, especially high, I'm kind of mad that they already went with the inside the box, buzz down kind of safety type with the Bills and Cole Bishop. Because if not, I'd be all over the Michael Taff hype, especially in round 2. He is a player that when he's asked to come down and be in that kind of robber position or fly down and fill lanes and attack as a strong safety type in a split backfield, he's going to come down and play with his pads. Even if I know there was some question marks about like his size and his weight class that he was coming into the season with, he definitely plays a lot stronger and a lot bigger, because he does run with a lot of speed and transitions that's really good when it comes to tackling form and hitting with power. I do think as a coverage player, he still needs a little bit of work when it comes to, fighting through his zones and being able to recover and attack, especially when they put him into some conflicting situations, like when they have 2 receivers in his zone class and he's supposed to let one go through into a different zone and then attack the other one. He does have some pause of that. And I do think there can be at times some different athletic, specifically stiffness in like man coverage. So I'm interested to see how he operates in this game, because there is a more physical weapon that Florida has with J. Michael Sturdivant, where you think that maybe that could be something they're going to try to test these Texas safeties with, is can they really bang with a guy like you have the Malik Mohammeds and now Michael Taff, again, another more undersized player in that secondary. Are you going to be able to go up there and bully this secondary? And I do think Taff, as someone who is in that smaller weight class, but unlike a Muhammad, like we talked about earlier, he plays above that to the point where I'm not concerned about when it comes to his ability to fit and fill the run when coming down and being a lower level defender, or coming from the higher and further back and filling that lane, as well as when it comes to being in coverage. You're not going to worry too much about him getting bullied off the ball in coverage specifically. He's going to fight with that tenacity. So I think they may test him down the field with Sturdivant, but I do think this could be a game where Taft shows like, okay, yeah, he can step up and fight with guys who are in that 210 plus weight class like a Sturdivant is.
So where are you on safety Michael Taff, Jake?
Yeah, I think Taff is going to be a fun discussion when it comes to the draft, because I think on one hand you have, I think, the people who are looking for like the testing numbers to potentially be off the charts, right? For a lot of players, right? You're looking for those great testing numbers. And for some reason, Taff to me feels like he's not going to meet some of those expectations of like people want to see all green on the card. But ultimately, I don't think that matters, to be honest. I think for the guys that need it, because their processing speed isn't very high, great, cool. I'm glad you have all that athleticism to tap into when you're a step behind. I don't think Taff is going to be a step behind. I don't. Especially last year, because again, we haven't seen them much against top competition, just one game. But last year, you see him kind of in the box, right? When they get into that, single high kind of middle field closed looks, which they did heavily last year, you see a player who is communicating, understanding, guys going in motion. Okay, this is what we have to change or something like that. Like you see him doing all the hand signals. He is getting people into the right spots and making sure everybody is ready to go. That type of cerebral play, teams are going to love that. They're not going to care that the RAS card has maybe red or is like exclusively yellow, right? You look at like the Brian Branches and the McKinney cards and all of that, like, and Hamilton's because his 40 was not in a straight line, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Like he's going to be the one guy where it's like, yeah, I don't really care. I know, oh yeah, maybe he's, maybe a more linear athlete that isn't like the greatest in transition. He's not going to wow you when he's doing, some of the drills and the 3-cone and all of that, blah, blah, blah. But what he can do is, as Owen kind of mentions at the top of like, can he be the guy who's going to buzz down when you're in that middle field closed look, right? Is he going to be a tone setter? Is he going to, create big hits? Is he going to, be wrapping up? Like, I think, and again, this isn't a guy he's not like ineffective transitionally, right? I think he gets out of the pedal pretty well when that happens. But like, again, it's just quick trigger. He sees what's coming. Like he's on you quickly because he knows where the play is going. Like the smarts, I think, is just something that we take for granted of guys like, oh yeah, they'll figure it out. They're super explosive or fast or whatever, and they'll figure out that stuff, and they just don't do it. And Taff is one of those guys who is going to do it right away. You don't have to worry about like, oh, am I going to have like coverage mishaps on my defense on the back end? It's like with Taff, it's like, no, probably not. Maybe occasionally if the verbiage changes at all, right? Getting that quick adjustment from Texas to the league. But by the time we're down the stretch of the rookie campaign, he's going to have everything, boom. I know what we have to check to here. Motion here. I know where everybody has to be. Like he is going to be the guy who's going to get people in position. He is somebody who I think, you're walking into day 2 and you're like, all right, we need a safety. Boom. Just go get a football player who knows what he needs to be. Like that's the guy they should be going after.
He reads to me a lot more, especially through the draft process. To bring up 2 recent examples, he reads a lot more to me as a Cameron Kitchens than a Nicky Manwarier kind of player, where you have Kitchens who, and no, they're not the same exact player. I'm more so thinking about it more physically. Kitchens was more of that over-the-top free safety. But like you saw like Taff last year when playing with a more traditional free safety type of Makuba, where he was able to have things play out in front of him, keep things in front of him, and then his ability to quick trigger and attack. He has good quick twitch. It's more so like, okay, does he have the long speed? Does he have all these high-end, like desirable traits? But like it show, like he plays a lot more physical than he is listed weight-wise. He plays a lot faster than I'm sure he's going to test as, and it's all because, and you see this a lot of like the great players in the NFL, is that their mind is fast enough to overcome physical deficiencies.
Yeah, I think a great example, Evan Williams for Green Bay, who I think is in position a lot when it comes to playing the position. It's like, okay, yeah, his athleticism was like pretty good, but he wasn't talked about as much as you mentioned as some of the other guys in previous classes because you weren't talking about like the elite size, the elite testing numbers. It was just kind of like, no, he just shows up with the lunch pail, knows where he needs to be, and plays. Like it can be pretty straightforward, and we're not gonna let it be, That's that as a collective, as the draft process goes, right? It's not going to be, we're not going to hit the single to left field. We're going to try and, oh no, like this is not good. The testing's not good. What are we supposed to do with this guy? And it's like, no, just let him put the pads on.
Yeah, if you're a team in need of
the underwear Olympics don't matter to me that much.
Especially with like a player like him, and even at the combine level, you're going to see he's going to come out and he's going to kill it in the interview process. And if your team, watch out for if you're a team that needs like a starter in your back 7, especially if you run a split safety kind of defense, like these common like cover 2, cover 4 systems, he's going to be like you plug and play that guy. He's going to be starting from day 1 from your defense. He'll have to come in and earn it, obviously, not being he's not going to be like a first round pick or anything, but you have a hole there and your team drafts that, you can safely probably go into camp thinking, okay, we maybe have found our plug for a hole.
Yeah, even if you're a team that likes post-snap rotations to mess with quarterbacks, like to mess with the picture of what they thought they were going to see, like I think he will be totally fine and not out of his element at all doing that. He just seems like a guy who's going to just slide in there. Nice and easy. Don't have to worry about it too much.
Well,
We
that
don't
was
we
a
don't like
pretty,
that. We don't
that
like
was
that.
a
We
pretty
like
good
the
deep dive on Michael Taft. There was no payment made for that detailed discussion. That was really good. I have a question for you guys. Like, if you look at the Texas defensive line, how does the defensive line compare to Texas defensive lines of, let's say, last year, the year before, in terms of how well they play? And then is that going to translate into draft stock for players like Cole, Brevard, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, and there's probably a few other names that could be thrown in there?
I feel like comparing them to like specifically because it's Texas and they've had so many like big hitters come out of that D line, even like last year with Alfred Collins, and like previous years with T'Vondre Sweat. I'm forgetting the other D tackle that came out of there recently.
Murphy.
Murphy, yep, Murphy, yep. And then also you had like even like edge rushers like I remember back when the Joseph Asai days when he was coming out, he was a big talking point coming out of Texas. Like there's a lot of big time names in the draft sphere that you saw coming out of Texas. And it's like, okay, when you have those kind of upper echelon players coming out, are you really going to, it's hard to kind of stack up against that. But I do think they play well enough. And again, we haven't seen a ton of looks at them against higher end competition. It's going to be like their first good look since week 1 against Ohio State. But like, Jim, you probably put this question here just to get me talking about Cole Brevard. Cause like, I was in love watching his tape at Purdue. Another player coming from, I think it was Purdue, right? Coming from Purdue that played like on a team that went like 1-10 or some stupid thing like that, but like all their good players left to go to other better teams and could be starters on power forward teams, and somehow Purdue just couldn't put it together. But he's a guy that like he has that size of a nose tackle, which shows flashes and glimpses of like this more finesse player who can win with some pass rush moves and has the creativity rushing from the interior. And then you also saw it in so early on in the Ohio State game, because I wanted to check up on my boy, see how the first game against his probably his best looking competition all year is going to be. And he held up pretty well when it came to playing the run, being more anchor down, sturdy in the middle of the defense, being a more traditional nose tech. I know that Purdue lined him up in all these different weird alignments, so it was kind of hard to get a good gauge in how he was going to translate specifically. But I think for him, he's one of the guys that are going to benefit the most from this move to this Texas D line, because he's being played more as a traditional one tech run stuffer, and then on pass downs show if you can get loose and get some pressures up the middle. So for me, this is exactly what I thought he would come in and start to look like, more of that, later day 2, early day 3 run stuffing, high upside athletic D tackle that is allowed to shine in a defense that understands how to utilize him more and has some other talent to surround him with that all kind of works off each other and implements together. So I think for me with the draft output, obviously I'm a little biased, but Cole Brevard has definitely lived up to the billing I thought he would when we did the Texas preview coming into the season.
Yeah, and I heard your cat agreeing with you.
Yes, Dominique Orange and Cole Brevard. Mowgli's a massive fan of both of them.
Jake, how about you? How do you think the Texas defensive line stacks up right now? Like, just as a unit, are we looking at elite draft prospects, or do you think it's maybe a notch below what we've seen in years past?
Yeah, it's hard to it's going to be hard to match what they've put out there the last couple of classes, right? Like that, and then obviously we're going to be talking, I'm sure, a bunch about Colin Simmons, for future seasons. But yeah, I think it might just be chalked to like more of like what you see. I'm trying to think of like a good team to mirror. Maybe Michigan's a good team to mirror when it comes to that, where it's like maybe guys that maybe that's a bad example because of Graham. But like some of the edge players like Trey Moore, right? You're thinking more of like, not Uche, the most recent guy that the Rams picked. His name is escaping me now. But like guys
Bruce?
the undersized edge rusher from Michigan last year.
Josiah Stewart, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So guys like that, where it's like, okay, can you fill a certain role for me or something like that? Like I think Trey Moore has flashed. I think PFF's got him, and he came up from UTSA to Texas in 24. PFF's got him with close to 40 pressures in each of the last, 3 seasons heading into this one. And no, I think for him, it's just building out that repertoire more. Like he can surprise you with some athleticism, right? I think he last year, I want to say against Michigan, he kind of flashed what you love seeing from guys like Verse, where it's like a little stutter step, and then you get into the bull rush and stuff like that. Like that's going to play. Like teams that are going to be rotating in guys, like he's going to play in that regard. Now, Brevard, I think, is more interesting because of where we're going as a league and under center and trying to defend the run. I mean, you got to go to the third one against Ohio State, where he is standing up essentially 3 offensive linemen on the 3rd and 1, and essentially just shuts the door on a first down and forces a 4th down. Like that play, I think encapsulates why probably why Owen's so excited about a guy like Brevard, because of what you can do right there. Like you can stand guys up like that, in a top 5 matchup. Like, are you kidding me? I wouldn't run his way, that's for sure. If I were Florida, I'm excited to see how Slaughter and the guys deal with a player like that who can just hunker down, like just almost immovable. And I think that's what's really exciting about this matchup, is seeing matchups like that, because I think Brevard, again, they could be wrong. They could be wrong on this regard. Just referencing PFF for a second of like where they aligned him in that Ohio State game, they kind of seemed to move him around a little bit from the A gap to the B gap. And I think, based on plays like that, I don't need to see. I know where he needs to be. Like you don't have to get creative. You could put him right in the middle of your defense, let him take on multiple guys, let him 2-gap, let him do all that great stuff, like to kind of erase run games and free up guys like Anthony Hill to fly downhill and be physical. And even, guys like Taft who can stick their nose in the run game as well. Like having a guy like that is, if you're a team who wants to, hey, can we defend the run without committing so many bodies to the run game, right? Like a Vic Fangio defense where it's like, hey, can we cap this explosive passing game and also, be able to defend the run at a high level? Well, you get a guy like Brevard in there. You get a guy like Dominique Orange, right? Who I know we're not talking about Iowa State in this episode, but like you get guys like that. And that's the value that they bring to the table, especially, and I think it's tougher for guys like Jordan Davis when they're much taller, right, to win with leverage. And you see Brevard do a great job with that. Right, I think he's listed here as 6'3", 346. So like, yeah, not super tall where it's like a struggle to, okay, I got to play lower. Like he's already naturally low enough for the most part to handle that. So yeah, I think it might be a little underrated just because, considering what we've seen come out in recent classes, but by no means is it a poor one. I think this is a really good unit. There's a reason, having lost so many players to the draft, that this is still a team that came in preseason 1. Like they've got forces of nature on this defensive line.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Jim. I was just gonna say that I really enjoy that. We talked about already Taft, now Hill, now we're talking about Brevard, where it's like that spine of the Texas run defense up that interior, where you have on every single level an element that works off of each other, that they can make the other man right, and it works for like. If you're a team that has, like, I'm going to be circling this game for a Jake Slaughter 2025 game to come back and watch and update my grade with, because as a guy who plays more around that 300-pound weight class, how he's going to hand up with a 350. Like when I watched him for last year's draft, before he returned to school, that was one of my biggest things. Like, okay, I love him as a move blocker, but how can he hunker down and really drive block guys out of his gap, especially when he's giving up the weight class advantage? And not only that, how does he work well when it comes to taking on a guy with that level of power, and then also working off the double teams with that and getting to a guy like Anthony Hill or Michael Taft if they're coming in late. So it specifically for that matchup with Jake Slaughter, this is going to be a big time, like up to this point, probably his biggest test so far this season for Slaughter when it comes to how can he handle this specific situation, and also some other different variables they can throw his way as the center, the pivot point of that Florida offense. I think this is going to be a very pivotal game for him specifically when it comes to evaluating him for this upcoming draft. This may be the biggest game of his season when it comes to that.
Yeah, see, you guys don't need me. You're already setting it up. So we talk about the Texas defensive line, and there are 3 very highly rated Florida offensive linemen. Jake Slaughter at center, Austin Barber at tackle, and Najee Harris at guard. So who do you think has that matchup advantage? The Florida offensive line or the Texas defensive line? Oh,
it's hard for me to say, because I do think I do like the talent that Florida's offensive line has. I'm also a big fan of Brevard as well, and the talent that Texas D line has. So we talked about it. I'll throw out Jake was looking for a comparison, kind of like since the Bosa and Chase Young years, but like the Ohio State defensive lines they've came through, especially on like the edges, where it's a lot more like when it comes to a draft perspective, an NFL projection perspective, like a lot more like role player type edges, like starters or rotational pieces on the D line, but not like any of like the most dominant players, especially on the edge. But like in the interior, when it comes to Brevard and some of the other players that they had down that pipeline in Texas, like this is more of a leap year where they need to replace holes with some of these transfer guys, allowing for some of their younger players to come up. But I think between having Harris and Slaughter there, again, both guys, Harris is a bit bigger, a bit girthier, but Harris being on the lower level of the weight classes, you have them trying to go against a beefier interior Texas defensive line that gave Ohio State fits. And that's usually typically a team that we're talking about as like that's the powerhouse when it comes to producing these more power blocking interior offensive line blockers, even to last year with Donovan Jackson, my guy Chase McLaughlin in the center there. Like there were players that come out of Ohio State routinely that can favor more well matchup wise when it comes to like players that the Texas D line is going to be producing this year. So I do think the Texas D line has the advantage just because I think play style wise they have the more physical advantage. But I don't know if when it comes to evaluating the talents that are going to be coming out in the 26th class and kind of across the line as a whole entire unit as it encompasses, I don't know which side would have the more higher end players. I know Slaughter is definitely a fan, or at least with some of the draft process, a really highly touted player coming out as well. Definitely higher up, I think, on most big boards than a Brevard would be. But I do think when it comes to play styles and piecing that all together, I think Texas has the advantage.
Jake, how about you? Where are you on the Florida offensive line? Like, how highly ranked are those three players that I listed?
Yeah, I mean, I do really like Slaughter. I think, I think with all of these guys, it's really just, especially with Slaughter and, and Barber, it's kind of like, can you handle the immense levels of power that some of these guys will use in some one-on-one matchups? Because I think with Barber especially, it's kind of like, okay, you're a tall guy, like you're quick, he does a nice job, gaining control early at times, and he's got the footwork to match and all that. But does the pad level give him, and the height create issues of like, okay, does he kind of have to waist bend to match, which is just not a good. It's not a good recipe sometimes. And with Slaughter, I think as well as like he is, I think again another cerebral player who, can win with some quicks. I think when he, is seeing what he's getting to at the second level, he's quick enough to get there and do all that. He's doing a great job, in a lot of the zone stuff of like, okay, I need to help my guard next to me, extend that arm as you're moving and getting going to make sure you're helping guys next to you. Like he does all of that so well. But I do think, in pass protection with him, it's a lot of like, okay, guys are trying to cross my face. They're not doing that. Like that's not happening because my footwork's so good and I've got good enough core strength. But like against extremely, extremely powerful players, not these, 290, 300-pound guys who are trying to win, as almost edge rushers do, right? Attack half of you and try to turn the corner. Like how do you handle guys just kind of running, straight through you? As some of these powerful guys who can, at times get lower as well. So I think with this Florida team, it feels like they've got a lot of like finesse, athletic, players who do a good job handling guys that, aren't like the bigger freaks at edge rusher and defensive tackle where, they do a good job controlling and mirroring and all of that, but can they, really start to move players around? And I think Texas is like the perfect, team to kind of answer that question for you, because it's going to be the point of like if Florida, and again, Florida would be somebody, to study how much they run, duo and counter and stuff versus zone and all of that. And I know with Slaughter, they pull him a lot. So, if they're mixing it up, like how much, are they going to be able to say, hey, let's use Slaughter and somebody to double team a guy? Can we do that? Do we trust Slaughter to move a guy, off the ball and get and create some of these gaps for our runners? Or or are they just going to try to, with this Texas O-line, just kind of outflank them a little bit with the speed, the athleticism when it comes to running the football? It's going to be fascinating. I think if Florida does a decent enough job playing to their strengths, I think they can win the matchup. But ultimately, when it's some of these one-on-ones, where power is going to be involved, where low man wins is going to be involved, can they handle it? It's a great question. I'm not sure, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out.
Yeah, I think
it's
definitely
important for the draft, and it's very important for the draft.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like last week they played against Miami, and you saw specifically with like Barber going against a player who succeeds through the power, the speed to power, and kind of this burst into forklifting you and getting you on skates, and Ruben Bain. Like you definitely saw Barber struggle with that. So he's going from that same issue to the same issue this week with bigger players that want to come downhill and really bully you at the point of attack. And it's going to be, can you get a get back? Is it going to be, are you going to be able to bounce back and show that you can handle it? Or is it going to be a consistent thing where you're like, okay, this is actually an issue he's going to have to deal with, especially with trying to out leverage guys and having not being the beefiest guys on the outside there, especially at the tackle position. Are you able to overcome that specifically with your skill set?
So, Owen, I think, you're going to be doing offensive line on Tuesdays. You'll be doing defensive line on Wednesdays. I think you're going to be coming back to the Florida-Texas game. Probably to watch about 8 or 10 players. And Steve dropped something in the chat. Trevor Gooseby versus Tyreek Sapp. How we didn't lead the show off with that one is on the producer. Oops. But how high do you have Tyreek Sapp? How high do you have Gooseby? And where do you see one of those players having an edge in that matchup?
So I have them both relatively high. I wouldn't say I haven't done the full on deep dives for both of them, especially with Gooseby, where I was on kind of him to build up some more starts this season. And a game like this is going to be definitely one that plays into that. And it's going to be on my bingo card, like you were saying, that when we do the offensive line breakdowns and I'm doing my full evals once we start coming into the podcast, I think this is going to be when I circle back to and come back to, because you have a matchup like Sapp for a player like Gooseby, who was unproven as a consistent starter coming into this season, and now had week 1 against Ohio State, and now here again in this game against Florida, where you have a player like Sapp who can win in a couple different ways, especially with, like we talked about, being like a 275-pound edge rusher, can win with that power, and you have a guy like Gooseby who is 6'7", 312. Again, not the densest of frames, and needs to play with better leverage to be able to compensate for that and be able to anchor down against these power rushers. It's going to be showing an element that, like, okay, we understand you're a freaky athlete who people were ranting and raving about as like tackle one before you've even played like a full season's worth of starts coming into this season. Now that you've had a couple games on your belt and you've looked good, you've played well, can you come in and play against some of these more unique and skill-specific type players who are going to come at you and they excel at winning in a way that they know how to win with it, and you have to then compensate for that? It's kind of similar. It's the flip side of the conversation we were just having with the Florida offensive line versus the Texas defensive line, where you have a tackle. Florida's tackle is going to be struggling with more so the power elements, and the Slaughter being an undersized guy, how he's going to handle the power elements. I think Gooseby being a guy that I'm more confident can do that, but it's still going to be something I'm going to watch out for, especially for a guy who has going to have leverage questions, being 6'7" plus and 312 pounds. How is he going to be able to leverage down and anchor down against a 270, 280-pound edge rusher, especially because that's going to be what he's going to be facing off against if he goes to the next level. Like, you need to show in these limited amount of starts that you can go against these multitude of body types and pass rush types and just attack those differently, especially with some more natural skill, with being such an underdeveloped or not as much snaps on tape type player.
Jake, how about you? How do you see Tyreek Sapp versus Gooseby?
Yeah, I think Sapp is really fun to watch when you're like, okay, when he's almost kind of shading on the tackle a little bit at times, where it's, yeah, he just plays low, and is a guy who is just leverage your gap and then kind of snatch guys at times, and he can set the strong edge. And Florida almost plays him as a little bit of 3-4 defensive end at times because of the size, right? I think probably at least some teams, at least when you look at how they've drafted, right? San Francisco's done a lot of that, of where they, and Green Bay as well, where they want kind of the bigger guys on the edge. where they don't want the 240, 250 guys because, frankly, you're going to just kind of run at those guys, right? You're going to get the tight end on that side and pretty much just kind of push them around, right? And take advantage of that. Whereas with Sapp, it's going to be, I can anchor, I can sit, and I can play with good leverage against the run and strike well and do all that, play with enough power. And I think with Gooseby, I think it's more intriguing the matchup, in the run game, because I think you see, even though Gooseby's got like the kind of that higher center of gravity where he's trying to push people around, right? He was able to put that on, put the flashes out there of like, I can kind of move some of these types around a little bit, where it's going to be interesting to see against a guy like Sapp, who I think does a really good job of, the lower body half strength, the core strength, and striking well, of like teams struggle to move him off the line of scrimmage. I think that's the most intriguing. Whereas maybe if they're going to get, Sapp any rushes against Gooseby, it's going to be kind of more, okay, the Sapp guy who kind of can stall out a little bit in the rush, where he, is a little bit higher up, like that might kind of be a little more stalemated, and Gooseby might get some more wins there because he's kind of, again, a toolsy player at tackle who, teams are really excited about. Hard not to compare him, kind of the tools of a Cameron Williams who teams are excited about, and he leaves for the draft and maybe did so a little too early, and we'll see how Gooseby, handles that. But yeah, I think the real intrigue is going to be in the run game. Like, can a player like Gooseby move Sapp off the ball, being so tall and kind of not having the lower pad level pretty much every time? Like, is that going to be something you can consistently do in a matchup like that?
Yeah, I think especially because like just the way they're built, it's like the opposite dichotomy where it's 6'2", 275, 6'7", 313. Like the distributions is totally different. The center of gravity, even if it's not play side blocking for like Gooseby, it's going to be like, this is going to be a player that's going to make you go 12 rounds in them the whole game, where it's going to be absolute hell on earth to successfully block him and go through that entire game, where it's going to be a real testament for this young player, again, limited starts, who maybe hasn't had to go, to war with a player that's going to make him his entire job. Like you said, like he's not the most dominant pass rusher out there. I felt more so it played into, can those dichotomies play against each other? Can he overcome that with athleticism to not give into that? Even though I don't think Sapp is like the best pass rusher when it comes to utilizing his power rush specifically. Yeah. But like, it's going to be, is he going to wear him out? How is Gooseby going to be looking in the fourth quarter? Are they going to be able to run that more power rushing style with Baxter going towards his end there, rushing towards that side? Can Gooseby really overtake him and win those reps specifically, like you were saying? So I think this is going to be I'm expecting Gooseby to win it, but it's going to be, how does he look doing it? Does he look like he's getting his ass handed to him, but they're still succeeding? Or is he winning it in a dominant fashion, despite the size advantage going more towards Sapp's way when it comes to those styles of battles that are going to be having on that edge?
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly. Of like, are the wins going to like aesthetically give you some pause of like, that might not be something you get away with on Sundays, but you can, more so on Saturdays. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
So we've gone 53 minutes. We've talked about a safety. We've talked about a linebacker, and the rest. Oh, and we also talked about a corner. Yeah. And the rest of the discussion was all on linemen. Like, I love this podcast.
As really. It should be.
Yeah.
It's where the game's won.
So why don't we pause for podcaster identification? And you want to let everybody know about Weekly Huddle and everything else that you do?
Yeah, so I'm over on the Weekly Huddle over at YouTube and at Twitter at Weekly Huddle. It's been kind of slowed down with my coaching commitment recently, but especially once the draft season kind of picks up a bit more as we enter the winter, and I have more time freed up, I'm going to be posting a lot more content over there and starting back up my streams where I'm going to be live streaming, watching myself watch these players live. I think I did watch Caleb Banks live, was my most recent live stream I did. I threw on a couple D-tackle clips, and I do think Caleb Banks was one of the guys I ended up watching on my live stream over there. And if you missed it, you can head over to the Patreon and check out Weekly Huddle on Patreon, where you can see the repostings of all those live sessions where you can watch through and watch me break down film live. And I try to talk about every play I watch and keep a good conversation going throughout. as well as you get access over there on the Patreon. You get access to my big board and each individual player profile through that big board, so you can see what I'm specifically grading on and what I'm saying about these players specifically in their own personal profiles as well.
Jake?
Yeah, so at Jake NFL Draft on Twitter, that'll give you, Substack and YouTube links. If you search Jake NFL Draft, all one word on YouTube, you'll find a lot of player breakdowns there, some draft, a lot of receiver stuff, a lot of young players. How are the rookies doing? How are the second year, third year players doing? A lot of those type of film breakdowns, and of course a little bit of Packers stuff as well, right? On a second channel that you can find, in the links if you follow me there. So. Yeah, a lot going around during football season for sure. So it's, it's kind of really only that 3-month, work in the summer where it's, there's just a little bit going on versus a lot. So plenty of stuff going on with all that.
We can make football content 12 months a year. That's not for all three of us. I don't think that's really a challenge. Give Owen and give Jake a follow, please, and thank you. This channel functions, Draft Professor functions, because Owen and Jake show up once a week. And when you get 24 people that do that, we have daily draft podcasts at 7 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern every weeknight, podcast on Saturday, podcast on Sunday. And we are about to dive into the draft class. So at this time next week, Owen and Jake will be breaking down 9 safeties. They're not the top. We on this channel, we try to cover most players that are drafted in rounds 1 through 5. So we're going to be diving into approximately 30 safeties, and on average, only 17 get drafted. But I really like the safeties. Like everybody, when we do the team previews, everybody's saying, I like this safety, I like this safety. But then when you add all that up, there's 30 safeties everybody likes, and on average, only 17 get drafted. So Owen and Jake will help people sort through fact from fiction in the safety class.
You won't hear a lot of Michael Taff on that episode. Hopefully you got your fill on this one.
I don't know.
Well,
I see him on the list next week.
He's on the list.
Oh, really? Oh, let's go. We'll just run this one back.
So the safeties for next week. So here's a good commercial. Zakee Wheatley from Penn State. Peyton Bowen from Oklahoma, Jalen Husky from Maryland. Mel Kiper pointed him out on a network to be named later last week. Safety A.J. Halsey from LSU. Safety Terry Moore from Duke. I believe Moore's out with an injury. You may have to go back a year to find some tape. Miles Scott from Illinois. Michael Taft from Texas. Earl Little Jr. from Florida State, and Genesis Smith from Arizona. Okay. And those, maybe one of them is the top 8 safety in the class. I think Taft will probably grade as one of the top 8.
Who could it be?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Yeah.
There are still 18 other safeties that we want to talk about. And we'll do 9 more the week after as well. So go, if you want to know about all the podcast schedule, just follow me on X at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. That is the draftprofessor.com Twitter page. It's the same on YouTube, and we will also post the podcast to Spotify. Okay, so as quickly as we can, do you guys want to do like 15 or 30 seconds on players we haven't talked about and just point out, that they're in the draft, maybe something that you like on the player? And Jake, do you want to filibuster for Owen for a minute or two?
Yeah, I can highlight 2 guys. I know this is somebody we talked about when we did kind of the tight ends, before the season began, with Jack Endries, of a player who got off to a decent start, had 2 touchdowns against San Jose State, but was more of a guy I think we were talking about as kind of like these big, smooth receiver, more so than a true tight end playing in line. But again, when he's a smooth player, he finds space against zone coverage. I think he is still somebody who you should definitely be keeping an eye on in this one. Just, in terms of the middle of the field, is something that I feel like Arch is going to have to access a little bit more. I think we've kind of seen he's sometimes a little late to the boundary at times. And so Andries might be a nice little safety valve for him in this one. I was going to just highlight, because I know Bill Sparks is a big fan of this guy. I know he hasn't gotten off to the start that I think Bill had hoped so far this season. But J. Michael Sturdivant, who's been at Cal, who's been at UCLA, now at Florida, just 8 for 81 and a touchdown so far in 4 games. He's kind of more of that, bigger, try to get this guy to be a traditional X, but maybe not. Maybe he ends up being a big slot of like, a guy who's, to his credit, done a nice job of cleaning up drops. His second year at Cal, he had 11 drops on 102 targets. That's not ideal, but he's cleaned that up. He's making tough catches, over the middle of the field through contact, and it kind of has that bigger X receiver profile of kind of the throwback days.
Oh, and anybody else in the game you want to highlight?
Yeah, I want to say also, I think Sturdivant's also a Newt Weston favorite for his list, if I remember correctly. But we covered a lot of guys, and Andries and Sturdivant were both guys that, like, obviously we didn't really touch on the skill position guys a whole ton here. So I do think those are good calls, especially because Andries, I thought, would be, for him, I thought it'd be a lot more of them accessing that. Like you said, Arch isn't really getting to the boundary as much, and I felt like his role at Cal was a lot more of that gimmick touch guy, where I felt like they could use him in the Gunnar Helm role a lot more. And we saw that a bit with the Ohio State game, where he got some gimmick touches with the screen game and things like that, and he did show that he was able to work those hard-earned yards in the passing game. So for me, I think that was going to be a guy that I felt like could have gotten off to even a better start to the season than he did. But for me, I do want to talk about, because we talked about this Texas offensive line and kind of these players that they're going against with how it comes to, especially with like the SAP argument with Goobs we talked about earlier, with like the Texas running game. I brought up Baxter's name. I don't know if Baxter's playing this week. He was out last week. But if not, they also have Wisner there as well. So they have a good combination of backs there. So if they want to attack that running game, it's going to be a very interesting battle to see. Both players, for me, when I watched their tape, felt like they excelled more in that all power blocking scheme. So if they're going to want to come and down block these players and manhandle this Florida front seven, I do think that they're going to run into some issues, especially with some of the type of players they have in the front there, especially like if they want to run towards that SAP Gooseby battle. I'm interested to see how that develops. But for me, those running backs are definitely someone where I'm not as high on them as some other people I've heard, but they definitely have been pieces that I think could step up more so, especially with the development of some of these other Texas offensive linemen that are stepping in as starters this year.
Jake, anybody else you want to highlight?
Just wanted to put a note out there. CJ Baxter is listed as doubtful. We'll see. So I guess it looks like they just posted availability about when we started this. So I just wanted to catch that. It looks like maybe not for backs this week, but yeah, Wisner's certainly an interesting guy. Because again, with Arch kind of struggling, they're probably going to do their best to get these running backs involved, get a lot of the quick passing game, which I think could get Wisner and Andries involved. As to any others, boy, off the top again, I think if you want to just throw out like how the offensive line's going to do for Texas, just to keep hammering home the fact that we love talking about the trenches here. Just seeing how guys like where is it, DJ Campbell and them, like, again, another guy who's probably going to get reps against Sapp, because Sapp kind of lives in that little bit of a tweener world right now in terms of his alignment of like, again, we kind of mentioned like running the football. Is that going to be possible, right? Is this Texas line going to be able to kind of push guys around a little bit and take some pressure off Arch? Like, I think that, a lot of that is going to be, he might get matched up a little bit with guys like Sapp as well. So yeah, I think there'll be a lot of focus on kind of this Texas run game and guys we've highlighted of like, can these guys get going? Can these guys produce against, a pretty quality opponent along the defensive line, especially.
And then DJ Campbell from Texas will also be matched up against defensive lineman George Gums from Florida. Gums was mentioned. I think this is the third time we've covered Florida. The first two times, people really like Gums. I didn't necessarily hear, him jumping off the film from you guys, but that was a name that's been mentioned before. So let's close out the show. 17.5 is the over-under I came up with. Owen, over-under 17.5 players in the Texas-Florida game have their name called during the draft in 2026.
I'm going to go under just because for both, there's some players that you're looking at that may come out early. One of the players that we didn't touch on as much, and I'm pretty sure he still has a year of eligibility left, is DeAndre Moore Jr. Like, he's a player that's on the fence of whether or not he's going to come out. Arch is debatable, probably not going to come out. Goosby's another guy that, like, he is highly sought after, but if he doesn't have a season that he likes or he just wants to stay, there's so many players, especially towards the top end of these two teams, that like are teeter-tottering on whether or not they're going to commit or not. If you told me every single draft eligible player was committed to the 2026 draft class, I'd probably say yes on the over. But with so many questions on the players that I think are slam dunk going to get drafted, but whether or not they come out this year specifically, that's what makes me lean towards under.
So Jake, 17.5.
I think in the years before NIL, I think no question. I think you can get to that number. I think with Moore was a really good example. Even Endries, this is year 3, right? He was 2 seasons at Cal and then comes over. Like, he doesn't have to go if he doesn't, feel like he is going, is going to be picked high enough. And again, for a guy who's, more of a receiving threat, maybe that's in his best interest to stay at, a better program for a second year. And like, okay, maybe I just carve out the role of like a Gesicki trying to play big slot versus doing the tight end thing. Like, he can do that. Goosby's another great example. So yeah, I think when I went down our list, I kind of started to lose, kind of like slam dunk, no problem, at around 10, 11-ish, could get to 12, maybe 13 if you really kind of force the issue. So I would probably lean under as well.
Okay. So apparently I miscounted because I usually try to be closer. So
I think there's also the Arch Manning effect. Yeah. If Arch Manning comes back, you could see DeAndre Moore, Jack Endries, Trevor Goosby, like those guys can be like, okay, cool. So Manning's coming back. We get another year under Sark, and we get to play with this guy at another season while he develops more. That could boost our stock in addition to his own. So I think there might be, while also getting paid by a team that's going to shell out the money for that. So I do think there is specifically with Texas, and if Florida ends up getting a new head coach and there's a lot more opportunities for some of the other guys, or they want to move on to a different team after that, you could definitely see a lot of these players wanting to take the gamble and go back to school for another year to improve their stock there.
Yep. So just to refresh anybody watching. So Austin Barber, Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, Anthony Hill, Najee Harris. That's 5. Malik Muhammad, Jake Slaughter, Cole Brevard, Michael Taft, George Gums is 10. Trey Moore, CJ Baxter, DJ Campbell, Ethan Burke, Jalen Guilbeau puts us at 15. Now, some of those might be a maybe. So that goes back into what Jake was saying, is that some of those guys, by the time I got to that third group of 5, could go back. But then if there's 3 more in addition to the 15 that I listed, that's how you get the over. So that was where I was going with that. But sometimes my over under is a little bit closer. Sometimes you want to play me like Vegas odds, and that's all good. But we have been going here for almost 70 minutes. For Owen, Jake, myself, for the 98 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow at 7.